The stars looked different through alien eyes. Commander Zethkar stood on the bridge of his massive warship, watching the sensor readings with growing interest. His purple skin gleamed under the ship's lights as he studied the data flowing across the screens. "Commander," his communications officer called out, "we are picking up signals from the third planet in this system. The transmissions are coming from a species we have never seen before." Zethkar moved closer to examine the readings. The signals were strange and chaotic, unlike anything in their databases. "What do these creatures call themselves?" "They call themselves humans, sir. And they call their world Earth." The commander smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. This was exactly what the Catherian Empire needed: a new species to conquer, a new world to add to their growing territory. His fleet of 50 warships could easily handle whatever these primitive beings might throw at them. "Run a full scan of their military capabilities," Zethkar ordered. "I want to know how quickly we can end this." On the other side of the solar system, Captain Jake Morrison sat in his chair aboard the human monitoring station New Horizon. The station was small compared to the alien fleet approaching them, but it was humanity's early warning system for exactly this kind of situation. "Captain, we have multiple contacts on long-range sensors," reported Lisa Banks from her position at the communications console. 50 ships, maybe more. "They're big, sir. Really big." Jake felt his stomach drop. He had always known this day might come, but he had hoped it would be much later. Humanity had only just figured out faster-than-light travel a few decades ago. They were not ready for a war with advanced aliens. "Ryan, what do our computers say about their weapons?" Jake asked his tactical analyst. Ryan Cooper looked up from his screens with a pale face. "Sir, each of their ships could probably destroy our entire fleet by itself." "We're completely outgunned." Jake nodded slowly. He had expected as much. But humanity had prepared for this possibility. They had a plan, even if it seemed crazy to most people. "Lisa, open a channel to Earth Command. Tell them we're starting the welcome protocol." Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her controls. "Channel open, sir. Earth Command, this is New Horizon. We have first contact with what appears to be a hostile alien fleet. Beginning welcome protocol transmission now." Back on the Catherian command ship, the communications officer looked confused. "Commander, the humans are transmitting something to us. It appears to be some kind of data package." "A surrender message?" Zethkar asked hopefully. "Most species gave up without a fight once they saw the size of a Catherian fleet." "No, sir. It seems to be entertainment content and historical records, and something they label as documentary footage." Zethkar frowned. This was not the usual response. Most primitive species either attacked uselessly or begged for mercy. They did not send movies and history lessons. "Put it on the main screen. Let us see what these humans think is important." The first thing that appeared was a human face. It belonged to a middle-aged woman with brown hair and kind eyes. She smiled at the camera and began to speak. "Hello," she said in a warm voice. "My name is Dr. Amanda Stone, and I'm a military historian. If you're watching this, it means you've made contact with humanity for the first time. Welcome to our solar system." Several Catherian officers exchanged glances. The human seemed friendly enough, but there was something in her eyes that made them feel uneasy. "We thought you might want to learn about us before we meet in person," Dr. Stone continued. "So we've prepared this collection of information about human history, culture, and daily life. We hope it helps you understand who we are." The screen changed to show what appeared to be very old footage. Humans dressed in animal skins were fighting with wooden spears and stone axes. They were covered in mud and blood, but they kept fighting even when they were clearly losing. "This is from our early history," Dr. Stone's voice explained. "Humans have been fighting for survival for thousands of years. We started with nothing but our hands and our brains, but we never gave up." Lieutenant Vextal, the Catherian psychological warfare specialist, leaned forward in his chair. "Commander, these images are quite disturbing. These creatures seem to enjoy violence." The footage changed again. Now it showed humans in metal armor, fighting with swords and bows. Cities burned in the background as armies clashed on muddy battlefields. "We learned to make better weapons," Dr. Stone continued. "We fought with metal and fire. We built castles and tore them down. We never stopped trying to become stronger." Zethkar watched with growing unease as the images kept changing. Humans with guns, humans with cannons, humans with tanks and airplanes. Each era showed more advanced weapons and more devastating battles. "Commander," Vextal said quietly, "they document their own violence. They seem proud of it." The footage reached the modern era. Nuclear explosions lit up the screen as cities vanished in balls of fire. The Catherians gasped as they realized what they were seeing. "We even learned to split the atom," Dr. Stone said calmly. "We built weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We pointed them at each other for decades, knowing that one mistake could end our entire species." "By the void," whispered the communications officer. "They built weapons capable of destroying their own planet, and they were willing to use them on themselves." But the most disturbing part came next. The screen showed modern humans engaged in what Dr. Stone called recreational activities. A man named Ken Walsh was hanging from a cliff face by his fingertips, hundreds of feet above jagged rocks. "This is rock climbing," Ken said with a huge smile on his face. "I do this every weekend. There's nothing like the feeling of conquering a mountain with just your hands and your courage." Zethkar felt his blood run cold. The human was risking his life for fun. He was smiling while doing something that would terrify most Catherian soldiers. "Send a message to the fleet," Zethkar ordered. "Tell all ships to maintain distance while we analyze this data further." "Sir?" his communications officer asked. "Should we not simply begin the attack?" Zethkar stared at the screen, where Ken Walsh was now explaining how he had once fallen 60 feet and broken both legs, then returned to climbing as soon as they healed. "No," the commander said slowly. "I think we need to learn more about these humans before we do anything else. Something tells me they are not as primitive as we first thought." The transmission continued, and with each passing minute, the Catherian crew grew more uncomfortable. These humans were not like any species they had ever encountered. They were something new, something different, something potentially very dangerous. Commander Zethkar had not slept in 2 days. The human transmission continued to play on screens throughout his ship, and each new piece of information made him more nervous. His intelligence team worked around the clock trying to understand what they were seeing. "Report," he demanded as he entered the analysis chamber. Lieutenant Vextal looked up from his workstation. The young officer's purple skin had turned pale, and his hands shook slightly as he operated the controls. "Commander, I request permission to stop this analysis and recommend immediate withdrawal." Zethkar's eyes narrowed. Vextal was one of his best officers, trained to break enemy morale through psychological warfare. If these human recordings were affecting him this badly, something was very wrong. "Explain," Zethkar ordered. "Sir, these humans do not think like any species we have ever encountered. They document everything, especially their failures and defeats, but they do not treat these as shameful secrets. They teach them to their children." The main screen showed a human classroom. Young humans, barely past infancy by Catherian standards, sat at desks while their teacher explained something called World War II. The children asked questions about battles and weapons as if they were discussing the weather. They educate. "They're young about violence," Vextal continued. "Look at this." The screen changed to show a human child, perhaps 8 years old, giving a presentation to his class. The boy spoke confidently about something called the Battle of Stalingrad, describing how millions of humans had died fighting in the frozen ruins of a city. "Very good. Tommy," the teacher said when the boy finished. "Can anyone tell us what lessons we learned from this battle?" A little girl raised her hand. "That humans will keep fighting even when everything looks hopeless, and that we get stronger when things get really bad." Zethkar felt his stomach turn. These were children, and they spoke of massive battles and endless death as if they were studying mathematics. "There is more, sir," Vextal said. He pressed another control, and the screen showed what appeared to be entertainment content. Humans watched stories about war, about fighting, about survival against impossible odds. They seemed to enjoy it. "This is what they do for fun," Vextal explained. "They tell each other stories about conflict and death. They call it entertainment." The footage showed humans cheering in large crowds as they watched other humans fight in organized combat. The fighters used their bare hands to hurt each other, and the crowd loved every moment of it. "They fight each other for sport," another analyst reported. "Not to the death usually, but they seem to enjoy inflicting and receiving pain. They call it boxing or wrestling or mixed martial arts." Zethkar watched as a human fighter continued to attack his opponent, even after taking severe damage to his own body. The crowd screamed with excitement as blood flowed freely. The fighter smiled. "By the void," Zethkar whispered. "What kind of species enjoys pain?" The answer came from another part of the human transmission. Dr. Amanda Stone appeared on screen again. this time standing in what she called a military museum. Pain teaches us, she explained, walking past displays of ancient weapons. Every wound makes us stronger. Every defeat teaches us how to win next time. Every loss shows us what we need to improve. She stopped in front of a display showing human soldiers from different time periods. We have never been the strongest species on our planet. We have never been the fastest or the largest. But we learned something that our predators never did. The camera moved closer to her face. Her eyes were calm but intense. We learned that losing a battle does not mean losing the war. We learned that being knocked down does not mean staying down. We learned that pain is temporary, but quitting lasts forever. Zethkar turned to his communications officer. How many wars have these humans fought? The officer checked his data. Sir, according to their own records, they have been in a state of war for 95% of their recorded history. Sometimes fighting other species on their planet, but mostly fighting each other. Fighting each other? Zethkar could not hide his shock. Why would they fight their own kind? They seem to consider it normal, sir. They fight over territory, resources, ideas, and sometimes just because they want to test themselves against worthy opponents. The screen showed more footage from human history. Massive armies clashing on battlefields, ships attacking each other on vast oceans, flying machines dropping explosives on cities. Through it all, humans kept fighting, kept adapting, kept surviving. Look at this, Vextel said, pointing to a new section of the transmission. They have something called survival training. The footage showed human soldiers being deliberately put into terrible situations. They were dropped in frozen wastelands with minimal supplies. They were forced to find food and water in burning deserts. They were taught to escape from captivity using any means necessary. This is basic training for our military, explained a human instructor named Sergeant Bill Martinez. We need to prepare our people for the worst possible situations. If you can survive this training, you can survive anything an enemy might throw at you. The training looked worse than anything the Catherians used to punish criminals. The humans were pushed to their physical and mental limits, then pushed further. Many collapsed from exhaustion. But they got back up and continued. The ones who fail the first time try again, Sergeant Martinez continued. And again. And again. We do not give up on anyone who refuses to give up on themselves. Zethkar realized that his own elite soldiers, trained from birth for warfare, would probably fail this human basic training. The thought made him feel sick. Sir, the communications officer called out. We are receiving another transmission from the humans. Put it through, Zethkar ordered, though he was not sure he wanted to see any more. A new human appeared on screen. This one was younger, maybe in his 20s. He wore strange clothing and had dirt on his face. Hi there, the young man said cheerfully. My name is Danny Rodriguez. I just got back from climbing Mount Everest. That's the tallest mountain on our planet. Thought you might want to see what it's like up there. The footage that followed showed Danny climbing through conditions that would kill most known species in minutes. Freezing wind, thin air, and deadly cold surrounded him on all sides. Several times he nearly fell to his death, but he kept climbing. Lost 3 toes to frostbite, Danny said, still smiling. But it was totally worth it. The view from the top is amazing. Plus now I know I can survive just about anything. Zethkar turned away from the screen. He had seen enough, sir? Vextel asked. What are your orders? Zethkar was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Continue the analysis. I need to know everything about these humans before we make any decisions. But deep down, he was already beginning to suspect that attacking Earth might be the worst mistake the Catherian Empire could ever make. Xenobiologist Glixmore had studied life on 1,000 different worlds. He had seen creatures that could survive in acid rain, animals that lived in the vacuum of space, and plants that grew in molten rock. But nothing had prepared him for what he found when he began scanning the planet the humans called Earth. This is impossible, he muttered, staring at his readings. No complex life should be able to exist under these conditions. Commander Zethkar entered the biology lab looking tired and worried. What have you found, Glixmore? The scientist turned to face his commander, his face pale with shock. Sir, I need to request immediate medical attention. I believe I am having hallucinations brought on by extreme stress. What are you talking about? Glixmore pointed at his screens. Either my equipment is completely broken, or the humans evolved on a planet that violates every law of biology we know. The main display showed Earth's vital statistics. Sethkar read the numbers and felt his blood run cold. Gravity is 30% higher than standard, Glixamore explained. The surface pressure would crush most species. The atmosphere contains 21% oxygen, which is highly toxic to most known life forms. And that is just the beginning. The screen changed to show Earth's weather patterns. Massive storms swirled across the planet's surface, some of them larger than entire Catherian cities. They have something called hurricanes, Glixamore continued. Wind speeds that can reach over 200 miles per hour. These storms can destroy entire coastlines. They happen regularly. Surely the humans hide from these storms? Sethkar asked hopefully. No, sir. According to their data, many humans choose to live in areas where these storms are most common. They call it the hurricane belt and seem to consider it prime real estate. The display showed footage of humans during a hurricane. Instead of cowering in fear, they were outside measuring wind speeds and taking pictures. Some of them seemed excited by the experience. This is Dr. Nicole Foster, a human woman said as she stood in the middle of the storm. Wind and rain battered her protective gear, but she continued speaking calmly into her recording device. We're currently experiencing winds of 140 miles per hour. This is actually a relatively mild hurricane by our standards. Glixamore pressed another control. It gets worse, sir. Look at this. The screen showed Earth's oceans. To Catherian eyes, they looked like vast pools of poison. The water was filled with sodium chloride and other chemicals that would burn most aliens' skin on contact. The humans not only swim in this toxic soup, Glixamore explained. They do it for recreation. Watch this. Footage showed a human named Brad Collins diving deep into the ocean without any breathing apparatus. He swam down into crushing darkness, surrounded by creatures that looked like living nightmares. The pressure down here would crush most land animals instantly, Brad said into his underwater camera. But if you train your body properly, you can hold your breath for several minutes and explore some amazing places. As if to prove his point, a massive creature with rows of sharp teeth swam past him. Brad waved at it cheerfully. That's a great white shark, he explained. One of our ocean's top predators. Beautiful animals. They've been around for millions of years, basically unchanged. Perfect killing machines. The shark was easily 3 times Brad's size and looked like it could bite him in half without effort. But Brad showed no fear. He actually moved closer to get a better video of the creature. By the void, Sethkar whispered. He's swimming with apex predators for fun. It gets worse, Glixamore said. Look at their land animals. The screen filled with images of Earth's wildlife. Massive creatures with huge teeth and claws, venomous snakes that could kill with a single bite, insects that could inject paralytic toxins, birds of prey with talons like knives. This planet is crawling with creatures designed to kill, Glixamore explained, and the humans live alongside all of them. The footage showed a human family having something called a picnic in an area surrounded by dangerous animals. Children played while their parents prepared food, completely relaxed despite being in what any sane species would consider a death trap. Look at this, Glixamore said, switching to another video. This is Dr. Michelle Gray, a zoologist. Dr. Gray stood in a large enclosure surrounded by massive feline predators. They had huge teeth and claws, and any one of them could have killed her instantly, but she moved among them calmly, even touching them. These are African lions, she explained. They're one of our planet's most successful pack hunters. An adult male can weigh over 400 pounds and has a bite, force strong enough to crush bones. One of the lions approached her and rubbed against her like an oversized house cat. Dr. Gray scratched behind its ears. Many humans work closely with dangerous animals, she continued. We study them, protect them, and sometimes even keep smaller predators as companions in our homes. The screen changed to show humans living with creatures that the Catherian database classified as deadly predators. Dogs with powerful jaws, cats with razor-sharp claws, even snakes and spiders that could inject lethal venom. They keep predators as pets, Glixamore said weakly. They voluntarily share their living spaces with creatures that could kill them. But the worst revelation was yet to come. The screen showed Earth's geological activity, massive volcanoes spewing molten rock into the sky, earthquakes that could split the ground open and swallow entire cities, avalanches of snow and ice that could bury whole mountains. The planet itself is trying to kill them, Glixamore explained. The surface is constantly shifting and changing. Molten rock regularly breaks through the crust. The ground shakes without warning. Mountains of ice collapse without notice. Footage showed humans living on the slopes of active volcanoes. They had built entire cities near geological fault lines. They seemed to consider natural disasters an acceptable risk. "This is environmental scientist Dr. Tony Mitchell," a human said as he stood near a bubbling volcano. "We're here to collect samples from the lava flow. This volcano erupts regularly, but the soil it creates is incredibly fertile. That's why so many people choose to live here despite the danger." Behind him, the volcano shot streams of molten rock hundreds of feet into the air. Dr. Mitchell continued his work calmly, as if deadly lava was just another part of his daily routine. "Sir," Glixmore said, turning to face Zethkar, "I have studied thousands of worlds, but I have never seen anything like this. Earth is not just hostile to life, it is actively trying to destroy any life that exists on it." "Then how do the humans survive?" Zethkar asked. "That's the terrifying part," Glixmore replied. "They don't just survive, they thrive. This nightmare planet has made them into something I have never seen before." The screen showed human children playing in conditions that would require full environmental suits for most alien species. They ran through rain that would burn Catherian skin. They played in temperatures that would freeze most known species solid. "Their children adapt to conditions that would kill our trained soldiers," Glixmore continued, "and they consider it normal. They call it fresh air and nice weather." Zethkar stared at the screen in horror. The humans were not just tough. They were products of a world that had spent millions of years trying to kill them, and they had not only survived but learned to love it. "What do you recommend?" he asked quietly. Glixmore was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice filled with genuine fear. "Sir, I recommend we leave this system immediately and mark it as forbidden territory. These humans are not a primitive species we can easily conquer. They are apex predators created by the most hostile world I have ever studied." He turned back to his screens, where footage continued to show humans doing impossible things in deadly conditions. "They call this place home, sir. What does that tell you about what they could do to us?" Chief Medical Officer Yithsi had never seen anything like it. In her 50 years of military service, she had treated battle wounds, radiation poisoning, and psychological trauma from dozens of different conflicts. But now, 60% of her crew was reporting for medical treatment, and they had not even fought a single battle. "Commander," she said as Zethkar entered the medical bay, "I need to speak with you immediately." The medical bay was full of Catherian soldiers lying on treatment beds. Some stared at the ceiling with empty eyes. Others shook uncontrollably. A few muttered to themselves in languages Yithsi had never heard before. "What happened to them?" Zethkar asked. "They have been watching the human transmissions," Yithsi explained. "The psychological impact is severe. They are experiencing symptoms similar to combat stress, but they have not been in combat." She led him to her office and activated a privacy screen. "Commander, these humans are affecting my crew in ways I cannot explain. They are not using any kind of psychic attack or mental warfare. They are simply showing us who they are, and it is breaking my soldiers' minds." "Show me the latest reports," Zethkar ordered. Yithsia activated her medical displays. The screens filled with recordings from human survival experts. A man named Danny Rodriguez was explaining how he had survived for 3 weeks in a frozen wilderness with no supplies. "The temperature dropped to -40 degrees, Danny said calmly. "I had no food, no shelter, and no way to call for help. So I built a snow cave with my bare hands and caught fish through holes I cut in the ice." He showed his frost-bitten hands to the camera. Several fingers were black with tissue death, but he continued speaking as if nothing was wrong. "Lost a couple of fingers, but that's pretty normal for extreme survival situations. The important thing is that I learned I could survive longer than I thought possible. Now I know my limits, so I can push past them next time." Yithsi paused the recording. "Commander, this human lost parts of his body and considers it a learning experience. My soldiers cannot process this kind of thinking." She switched to another recording. This one showed a human woman named Sophie Miller working in what she called the Antarctic Research Station. "We've been cut off from the outside world for 6 months," Sophie explained as she stood in a landscape of endless ice and snow. "The temperature outside is -70 degrees and the wind is strong enough to knock a person down. But this is actually pretty comfortable compared to the winter storms we get here." Behind her, other humans moved around normally in conditions that would kill most Catherian species in minutes. They seemed happy. "We choose to come here," Sophie continued. "The isolation and extreme conditions help us understand how humans adapt to impossible situations." Plus, the research we do here helps us prepare for even more challenging environments. More challenging? Zethkar asked. What could be more challenging than that? Yithsi switched recordings again. This time the screen showed space itself. Human astronauts floated in the deadly vacuum, protected only by thin suits. This is Engineer Carlos Martinez speaking from outside the International Space Station, a human voice said. We're currently traveling at 17,000 miles per hour, orbiting a planet at an altitude where the radiation would kill unprotected humans in minutes. The camera showed Carlos working calmly on the outside of a space station. Below him was the blue curve of Earth, and above him was the infinite darkness of space. We've been in space for about 6 months now, Carlos continued. The human body wasn't designed for zero gravity, so we're slowly losing bone density and muscle mass. But we adapt. We exercise, we take medicine, and we keep working. Yithsi paused the recording again. Commander, they voluntarily put themselves in the vacuum of space for months at a time. They know it is slowly destroying their bodies, but they do it anyway. Why? Zethkar asked. According to their records, they do it to learn, to explore, to prepare for even greater challenges. The next recording was even more disturbing. It showed human medical procedures performed by Dr. Tony Bennett in what they called an emergency room. This patient was in a vehicle accident. Dr. Bennett explained as he worked on a human who had suffered massive trauma. Multiple broken bones, internal bleeding, and severe head injuries. In most species, these injuries would be fatal. But the human patient was still alive, still conscious, still fighting. The amazing thing about humans, Dr. Bennett continued, is their refusal to give up. This patient's body should have shut down from shock and pain. But the human survival instinct is incredibly strong. We can work with that. The recording showed Dr. Bennett and his team performing procedures that looked like controlled torture. They cut the patient open, moved organs around, and inserted metal pins into broken bones. Through it all, the patient remained conscious and alert. Pain management is important, Dr. Bennett explained. But humans can endure remarkable amounts of discomfort when they know it's necessary for survival. Yithsi switched to her final recording. This one was perhaps the most disturbing of all. It showed human children. This is Dr. Rachel Green, a child psychologist, the recording began. I study how human children develop the mental and physical toughness needed for adult life. The footage showed human children engaged in activities that would terrify adult aliens. They climbed high structures and jumped into deep water. They competed in physical contests that involved deliberate contact and injury. They played games that simulated warfare and survival situations. Human childhood is basically survival training, Dr. Green explained. We gradually expose children to controlled risks and challenges. They learn to handle pain, fear, and failure while their minds are still developing. The recording showed a human child, perhaps 10 years old, climbing a rope dozens of feet above the ground. When the child fell, hitting the ground hard, he simply got up and tried again. Failure is an important teacher, Dr. Green continued. We don't protect our children from all danger and discomfort. We teach them to overcome it. Yithsi turned off the display. Commander, these are their children. They are training the next generation to be even tougher than they are. Zethkar sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. How are our soldiers handling this information? Badly, Yithsi admitted. Many are requesting transfers to other fleets. Some are asking to be put in medical suspension until we leave this system. A few have suggested that we should surrender to the humans before they decide to attack us. Surrender? Zethkar could not hide his shock. We have not even made contact yet. Sir, my soldiers have studied warfare for their entire lives. They recognize a superior force when they see one. These humans may have primitive technology, but they have something far more dangerous. What? They have spent millions of years learning how to survive anything their universe could throw at them. And they succeeded. Yithsi pulled up one final image. It showed a human family having what they called a vacation. They were whitewater rafting down a river filled with deadly rapids, screaming with joy as their small boat was tossed around by forces that could easily kill them. Sir, she said quietly, we are used to fighting enemies who want to survive. We can understand that. We can predict that. But these humans, they seem to think that risking death is fun. She turned to face Zethkar directly. How do you fight an enemy that enjoys the things that are supposed to scare them? Zethkar had no answer. For the first time in his military career, he was beginning to understand what real fear felt like. Commander Zethkar stood before his senior staff in the main conference room. For the first time in Catherian military history, he was about to recommend retreat without firing a single shot. The decision went against everything he had been taught. But the evidence was overwhelming. Officers, he began, after 5 days of studying human culture and biology, I am calling for an immediate strategic withdrawal from this system. Several officers gasped. Fleet Admiral Nextar, Zethkar's second-in-command, stood up quickly. Commander, surely you cannot be serious. We have 50 warships against a species that barely has space travel. This should be the easiest conquest in our history. Zethkar activated the main display. Sit down, Admiral. Let me show you something that will change your mind. The screen filled with footage from something humans called a daycare center. Young human children, barely old enough to walk, played together in what appeared to be organized chaos. This is Dr. Amy Stewart, a child psychologist, a human woman explained on the recording. She studies how we prepare our youngest members for adult life. The footage showed human children engaged in activities that made the Catherian officers uncomfortable. The children wrestled with each other, climbed on dangerous playground equipment, and played games that involved running into each other at high speed. Physical contact and controlled risk are important parts of human development, Dr. Stewart explained. Children need to learn their limits and how to overcome obstacles. We start this training very early. Admiral Nexitar watched in growing horror as a human child fell from a climbing structure, hit the ground hard, then immediately got up and tried again. The child was laughing. They train their young for combat from the moment they can walk, Zethkar explained. But it gets worse. The recording changed to show human teenagers engaged in what they called high school sports. Groups of young humans ran at each other with incredible speed and force. They collided deliberately, causing injuries that would disable most adult aliens. This is called football, a young human named Pete Davis explained, as he showed off bruises and cuts from a recent game. We practice 4 hours a day, 6 days a week. The goal is to run through the other team and score points. Pete was 17 years old by human standards, but he was already larger and stronger than most adult Catherian soldiers. His casual attitude toward pain and injury was deeply disturbing. Our children are trained warriors before they reach adulthood, Zethkar continued. But that is not the most frightening thing I discovered. He switched to a new recording. This one showed humans engaged in what they called space exploration. Engineer Victoria Hayes stood inside what appeared to be a metal capsule designed to be launched into the vacuum of space. This is the Mars mission preparation facility, Victoria explained. We're getting ready for the first human settlement on another planet. The screen showed technical details of the mission. Humans plan to travel millions of miles through deadly space to land on a planet with no breathable atmosphere, extreme temperatures, and radiation levels that would kill most known species. The journey to Mars will take 8 months, Victoria continued. The crew will be exposed to cosmic radiation, bone loss from zero gravity, and psychological stress from isolation. When we arrive, we'll have to build a colony from scratch in an environment that wants to kill us. She smiled as she spoke, as if describing a pleasant vacation. But this is what humans do, she continued. We go to places that tell us we don't belong, and we make them home. Fleet Admiral Nextar sat down heavily. They want to colonize deathworlds for fun? It gets worse, Zethkar said. Show them the terraforming plans. The recording switched to a presentation by planetary engineer Dr. Matt Johnson. He stood in front of diagrams showing human plans to modify entire planets. Once we master Mars, Dr. Johnson explained, we'll move on to more challenging worlds. Venus with its acid rain and crushing atmosphere. Europa, a moon covered in radioactive ice. Eventually, we hope to adapt planets that other species consider completely uninhabitable. The diagrams showed human settlements on worlds that the Catherian database classified as impossible for life, planets with gravity that would crush most species, worlds with atmospheres that would dissolve alien tissue in seconds, places where the very environment was designed to destroy anything that tried to live there. They don't just want to survive on deathworlds, Zethkar explained. They want to make more deathworlds and live on those too. The conference room was silent. Several officers looked physically ill. But sir, Communications Officer Jigsaw said weakly, surely they cannot be serious about this. No rational species would voluntarily seek out more dangerous environments. Zethkar activated one final recording. This one showed a human diplomatic message, sent directly to the Catherian fleet. A middle-aged human woman appeared on screen. She had kind eyes and a friendly smile, but something about her presence made every Catherian in the room feel nervous. "Hello," she said warmly. "My name is Victoria Hayes, and I represent the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. We know you've been studying our culture and history, and we hope it's been educational." She paused and smiled wider. "We want you to know that we're excited to meet you in person. We've been hoping to make contact with other intelligent species for a long time. There's so much we could learn from each other." Victoria gestured to something behind her. The camera pulled back to show what appeared to be a space station under construction. "We're building this facility specifically for first contact situations," she continued. "It's designed to accommodate species with different environmental needs. We've included atmospheric processors, gravity adjusters, and radiation shielding to make sure everyone is comfortable." The space station was massive, clearly designed to handle numerous species simultaneously, but what caught the Catherian officer's attention was its location. It was being built in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, in an environment that would challenge even the most advanced civilizations. "We chose this location because it seemed like neutral territory," Victoria explained. "Plus, the low gravity and abundant resources make it perfect for large-scale construction projects." She spoke as if building massive structures in an asteroid field was a simple weekend project. "We've also prepared cultural exchange materials," Victoria continued. "Information about human art, science, philosophy, and technology. We're particularly excited to share our terraforming research with you." The word terraforming sent a chill through every Catherian in the room. "Our scientists believe that with cooperation between species, we could make almost any world habitable. Imagine the possibilities if we work together to transform entire solar systems." Victoria's smile never wavered, but her words painted a picture of humans spreading across the galaxy, turning hostile worlds into gardens and impossible places into homes. "We hope to hear from you soon," she concluded. "We'll be waiting at the contact station whenever you're ready to visit." The recording ended. The conference room was completely silent. Finally, Fleet Admiral Nexstar spoke. "Commander, how do we fight an enemy that wants to terraform the galaxy?" "We don't," Zethkar replied. "We run." He stood up and faced his officers directly. "I am ordering an immediate withdrawal from this system. All ships will jump to maximum safe distance and await further orders. Under no circumstances will any vessel approach Earth or make contact with human forces." "What do we tell the High Command?" asked Intelligence Officer Kyle Moon. Zethkar was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "We tell them the truth. We found a species that has spent millions of years learning to survive in conditions that would kill us. They have turned their children into warriors and their homes into training grounds. They dream of spreading across the galaxy and making deathworlds into gardens." He paused and looked around the room at his terrified officers. "And we tell them that any species crazy enough to call Earth home should be left alone. For everyone's sake." 3 hours later, the Catherian fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth's solar system as quickly as their engines could carry them. Behind them, they left only a series of monitoring probes with a single message broadcasted on all frequencies. "Warning to all galactic civilizations. This system contains a species known as humans. Do not approach. Do not attempt contact. Do not attempt conquest. The inhabitants are not hostile, but they are something far more dangerous. They are survivors. Recommend immediate classification as protected observer species. Not for their protection, but for ours." As the fleet disappeared into the depths of space, Victoria Hayes received the alien message in her diplomatic center. She read it carefully, then smiled and turned to her assistant. "Well," she said cheerfully, "that's an interesting first impression. I guess we'll have to try harder next time to make them feel welcome." She looked out the window at Earth's blue skies and smiled. "After all," she said, "if they think this place is scary, wait until they see what we're planning to do with Mars.